Welcome to MSP Unplugged. Be the channel, command your channel with Channel Program. I'm your host, Paco LeBron. This is our live show where we discuss different ways to run your IT business, whether it's managed services, consulting, break fix, or anything in between. Let me go and introduce to you my guests. We have none other than Kevin Lancaster and Matt Soloman over at the Channel Program. Gentlemen, how are you both doing today?
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for
doing
having
great.
us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Good to see you.
Oh, appreciate No, appreciate you coming back on. Matt, you've been on our show before. It's a great first time with Kevin. This is the first time we've met. So appreciate you taking the time, talk a little bit more about channel program and kind of what you all are doing nowadays. But before we jump into all of that, I'd like to talk about my favorite thing, and that is Techcon Unplugged. This is going to be our in-person event that we have yet to announce the dates. And I know I keep telling everyone that we will announce this soon. I will tell you that officially we will have the announcements and the ticket sales by the first week of January. So that Tuesday show of January, which I believe is the 4th, we will make the official announcement of where we are, what are the dates. You can purchase tickets then, and the vendors that have signed on so far. It's going to be a great time. We've expanded operations. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what's going on here in the podcast. I've been very vague on some of the inner workings in the background. So that will be all come to light. We'll have Jeff Hallish here on the show, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. So if you are interested in knowing more, head over to techconunplug.com, sign up for updates and our newsletter. We will be announcing those into our online community and newsletter first before that show as well. So head over to techconunplug.com. So Kevin, Matt, for those that may not know you, I know there's probably a few viewers that do. Why don't I start off with Kevin? Kevin, why don't you give us a little intro about yourself and how you kind of got into the space where we are today?
Sure, thanks. So my background is 25-year entrepreneur. Started a consulting firm back in 2003 and have helped thousands of companies get into the public sector. That firm was geared toward public sector consulting and finding emerging technologies that we could represent, bring, and integrate into government agencies. And so starting with that, that's been a long-running business. It's been thriving over the last 17, 18 years. About 2014, kind of had this itch to go out there and create our own technologies, and that was early genesis of ID Agent, who I guess most in the channel might know me from. We created a product called Dark Web ID and spun it out of that consulting firm in about 2016, 2017. And that had a pretty rocket ship like ride to fame in the channel, and ultimately sold that to Kaseya back in 2019. Spent 2 years with Kaseya and left in April of this year, 2021, and reconnected with Matt after he had exited, and here we are today.
Very cool. Very cool. And then Matt, I know we had your intro in the last episode you were on, but why don't you give us a quick rehash on how you came into the industry and where we're
Sure.
at today as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been in sales and marketing my entire career, but as far as getting kind of ahead to where I got into the channel, I was actually working with Kevin at his consulting company, probably about a year and a half into it, and thinking to myself, I don't know if I'm going to last too much longer here. It's not super exciting to sell consulting services, and then he came to me with this crazy idea. It certainly felt crazy at the time, about dark web monitoring, and didn't know anything about it, didn't know anything about the channel, and even at that time we weren't even talking about MSPs, and took a chance, and as Kevin mentioned, once we decided to go 100% into the channel, it took off like a rocket ship. And I had the opportunity. I was very fortunate to be able to attend and really be the product evangelist for ID Agent for 2+ years around the world. I mean, I went to, I want to say, 100 events in person over a 2.5 year period, in several different countries. So it worked out well, and then took on a larger role at Kaseya, doing similar things as far as product evangelist, just on a bigger platform and more product offerings. And then was doing some consulting, talking to a bunch of emerging vendors, and Kevin and I started talking because we kept hearing really the same issues from the emerging vendors and from the MSPs, and so that's where the genesis of Channel Program really started. Is we kept hearing the same kind of complaints from both sides, and we were like, how can we find a way to fix some of this?
Sure, sure. So channel program. This is now obviously the new business that you both are as far as your new endeavor. Tell me a little bit about, I think you just kind of hinted toward that of like, just conversations with vendors and MSPs and partners and in the channel of obviously something broken, right? And what led you to believe that this was something that is needed, and then a little bit more of what channel program is trying to do to help solve some of that.
So I'll take a stab at that. So again, my background's been working with emerging, leading edge, bleeding edge, innovative technologies. And, as a consultant, but then, really as an MSP or as a service provider and providing those solutions to government agencies and large, SIs, state, local governments. And so I think it's like really unique perspective on the market. One, obviously being a vendor, and then on the other side, being the service provider and looking for support and insight from the vendors and looking for innovative solutions to bring to my customers. And so it really became apparent, with ideation, right? We were lucky that we had this magic trick. I often describe it as a magic trick. We'd have people come up to the booth, they put their email address into our platform, and they would see their compromised password out there 5 or 6, times, and depending on what data breach it had been involved in. And we were fortunate that we were able to create velocity, but most of these innovative vendors don't have that type of a magic trick, or they're boxed out from the industry, right? And we all know the names of the big platform players out there, and they're great. They do great work for the industry, but they oftentimes crowd out these innovative solutions that are coming down the pike. And so, on one hand, we wanted to help the industry, the MSPs, more easily identify these innovative solutions that might be alternatives to what they're using today. And one of the ways we could do that is with this concept of channel pitch, where every vendor, no matter what size they are, gets 7 minutes, and we coach them to get to the point. Don't talk to me about like all the fuzzy fun stuff and how, what color the buttons are and all that. Get to the point. How am I as an MSP going to make money? How am I going to become more efficient? I'm going to control my costs, my kit costs. How am I going to better secure my customers? And so we wanted to create an environment where the vendors have the ability to enter the marketplace, but they get to the point and they provide significant value to the MSPs on the other side of the screen. And Matt, if you want to get into, how the MSPs participate, that might be a good follow-up to this.
Yeah, I mean, so, one of the issues we heard, and I heard it on the road all the time, really talking to MSPs, is, you attend an event and all of a sudden you've given up your information to 50 vendors, which can be, tough. And I'm sure, Paco, that as an MSP.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened to you. So one of the twists that we did is we basically said to the community, you can actually attend this anonymously. And not only can you attend it anonymously, you can actually provide anonymous feedback to the vendors. Because another thing we've heard is, MSPs not feeling like they have a voice. And I'm not saying every piece of feedback is going to change the industry overnight, but if enough people are saying the same thing to these vendors, like, hey, whatever you're saying here is not resonating at all, it has nothing to do with what we're trying to do as an MSP, the vendors will listen, and particularly the emerging vendors, because they can pivot much quicker, right? They have that ability to do that. And so it's having them listen to those things early on, particularly, I think, is going to be super helpful. And the MSPs can choose to engage. There's several ways they can choose to engage with the vendor if they choose to, but it's kind of on safer terms. It's like, hey, come listen to this in a safe environment where you can hear really the no fluff version of what they're doing. And we also think we're giving access to more people in an MSP. I mean, typically at these events, you're getting the business owner, and depending, there's some technical events, but the techs can't typically probably take the travel time to even go to some of these events, and also are very, particular about giving up their anonymity. And so, to be able to say, hey, we can get 3 people to listen to, these within our MSP, we can all listen to this today. And, we're only spending an hour of our time. We're not spending all the money to attend. And, there's nothing that's going to fully replace in-person events, but we feel that there's room for more ways to engage I can't remember the report I read, but it was a couple like 2 years ago, where this is pre-COVID. Really, 60% of the industry still doesn't actually attend events. I think when we go to physical events, it's a bubble that we're all in, and we think we know everybody. But the truth is, we don't. There's so many MSPs that just don't either go to events for whatever reasons or don't have the time to travel, and so there's room for a lot more opportunities. And frankly, I think some of it comes from just being bored of the same playbook. As a vendor at ID Agent, there was a set that you would go to these events, and these events, and every year was very similar. And we just felt like there was a need to shake things up, and it's really no different than when things went virtual. I identified, like, very early on, I would say May of the original COVID year, that this is going to get so boring so quickly, like with all the and that's when I went out and we ended up booking Magic Johnson, and follow up we had Wayne Gretzky on. It was just, I think we're always just looking for ways to push the channel into new innovative ways.
So a lot there, and I want to unpack a lot of what you just said as well. And the first piece is, what an amazing idea. I think that when it comes to the channel, MSP, IT service providers engaging with vendors, but not feeling like they're being sold, but there are a lot of those that are willing to buy, and understanding how to get that right. I think that that's so pivotal, because you're right. I think that there is this concept where people dread trade shows because they know that they're going to drop their card, and then they know to prepare their help desk or their office manager or whatever the next week. Hey, I'm gonna get a flurry of sales calls, take messages, and I'll go through them as I can, which it's a waste of the vendor's time sometimes. And I don't mean as a waste of that action, but the limited ROI that they're going to get for that turnaround to get a qualified lead may be beneficial, may not be. But I think the other piece to that is it allows the MSP IT service provider to engage vendors, and in this idea, this anonymous way, which I assume is a custom platform. It's not a Zoom or anything that you guys are hosting, allowing them to provide that feedback and not feel, I wouldn't say unfiltered, but the ability to provide honest feedback versus being put on the spot and not hurting that individual rep's feelings if they're not interested in, right? But going on to the other side, that you all really just made a great point, and I think, and we advocate for that here on the show as well. We love working with emerging vendors. We love working with those that are trying to figure out, how can I make things better, and that are not stuck in their way. And it's amazing on how much of combined voice to a vendor can change and help their trajectory, versus them just saying, well, we know the playbook, we're going to go ahead and do it what we have in our previous several business that we sold, and this is just what's worked. You've now adopted a new way of where this, new normalcy, and I hate that phrase, but I don't know why I even used it, but this new way of thinking of how we're going to engage, what's the opportunity, and being able to really focus on, hey, we can do a service for this niche client, hey, we can do this for that, and really exposing of, yeah, well, the big three can take that, but we have such a depth in this space here, we can make this as our kind of our first stone or first jump to get into the industry, and now evaluate how can they grow. I think those are all just really great points. And then even more so, as you mentioned, is accessibility. I think that you just really hit on the point of, there are people that don't like to go to trade shows for whatever reason. Either they may not have the resources to go, whether that's time, money, etc. And it also allows for, because I have a big heart for part-time IT service providers, which, I was a part-time IT service provider at one point, and in the beginning, back in 2015, it was very frowned upon to say you're a part-time business owner, IT service provider. You're frowned upon being a one-person IT service provider, because they lumped us with the ones that just didn't care, the proverbial trunk slammers. Those phrases are for those that were the fly-by-night, that didn't care about their customers. And unfortunately, it took quite a few years for the industry to understand that they're not all like that, because of tools, automation, great partner reps and individuals like yourselves informing those to educate that, hey, there's a strong pattern here. There's a strong industry and niche that can be focused on. And I think this solves all that around as well. So I think I commend you for such a great idea that I think that will hit in so many levels to make not only the partners you're working with successful on both sides, but your company as well.
It's funny, we use these big audacious words like revolution and democratize and fragmentation, but it really does start with pitch, right? Yeah. One of the biggest complaints that we've heard as a vendor, one of the biggest complaints I had as a service provider is access and responsiveness for my vendors, right? When I had questions about, products or updates or marketing materials. And so with pitch, if we can encourage this level of like interaction and feedback and engagement, granted it's anonymous to start, but if we can get the emerging vendors to understand this is how this industry operates, right? They want to have a voice, they want to be engaged, and they're relying on you and everything you do as a vendor to grow their business. So this has to be, it has to be a two-way street. So if we can start with pitch and get the emerging vendors to think that way, when it comes to the next parts of the platform, Explorer and Command in the community, then hopefully we've revolutionized how vendors perceive their role in this environment. They have to be interactive. They have to be engaged. They have to be responsive. Otherwise, the community is going to go out to Reddit. They're going to go out to Discord. They're going to go out and vent, because they're not getting responsiveness from their vendors. And so if we can have an impact on that, then that alone is progress.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, because you brought up the point of like the vendor, are they spending the right time following up with leads that are maybe don't even want to speak with them, right? And so that's something I think both on the vendor side and the MSPs I think can take a lot of lessons from the vendors, because you as an MSP, you're out there, you're doing events as well, and there's always this attraction to going to an event where you get the full lead list and things like that. But is 100 leads on a lead list better than 10 A+ MQLs? That's right. And all that time spent following up 5 times to a contact that doesn't want to engage with you. So there's like that opportunity cost type of thing that, I think all of us have to ask ourselves about. But I think this is definitely, providing them those, A+ leads, because it's the MSP saying, yes, hey, I do want to connect with you. I would like more information based on what I heard today.
Right. A qualified lead is so much more stronger than having just that attendee, like exactly like you said. Yeah. And then even in some of those trade shows, and to go a tangent, is that, I think for every show, there's a few breakout vendors that kind of get a majority of where everyone's trying to spend their time to. So, this is an opportunity as well. But talking on channel pitch, you all are having your first one this Friday, December 10th. So that's very exciting. I see quite a few vendors that I know, some friends over at those companies. So that should be pretty cool. What's been kind of the feedback and excitement on them being in attendance of, because I would imagine this is obviously this is the first time of doing something of this nature. What's kind of the feedback you've been hearing from the vendors kind of prepping for this?
It's actually been really interesting. I mean, all of them are definitely very excited, and some of them a little nervous. It's asking, it's challenging them. And I would have felt the same way, because at ID Agent you have your 45-minute presentation, your 30, your 20, your 15, your 10, and maybe less. But this is like totally, they're having to kind of start from scratch and be like, okay, well, how do we dumb this down to 7 minutes, but also take out all of the, like if you're a security company, it's very common. And I'm a big fan, Paco, of educational presentations, but you can get that at every other event. So the 10 slides giving examples of security being an issue, we don't need those in this pitch. So it's taking out a lot of the things you're used to talking about and really just focusing in on those 5 to 7 slides you would really be talking directly to a partner with. So it's been fun talking to them, because you don't know, you have in your head what people are going to react, and but it's been very positive. And even the people are like, this is going to really challenge us, and I think it'll reshape how they speak at other events. I think it will really make an impact.
I think it will. I mean, I've been doing the coaching calls with the vendors, leading up to the pitch, and to Matt's point, they all have a style, right? And there are one or two when we're doing the coaching calls, we're saying, again, like we all understand that it's bad. we all have seen the hacker with the hoodie. We've seen that,
Right.
I don't know how many different iterations of that picture. Like that part, we all get it. So, let's pivot the message a little bit. And so we created a framework for each vendor to use. And I think most of them will stick to that framework. Maybe one or two mix it up a little bit, but it's really, again, how am I going to, as an MSP, make money? How am I going to be more profitable? How am I going to be more efficient? How my customers going to be more secure? And then, answer those questions and give me peer validation. Give me some examples where my peers have done this, because we all know, like, this marketplace, MSPs talk, right? And I think a lot of how vendors grow or spread in this industry is because MSPs talk to each other, right? So we're saying, look, yeah, there's a time and a place for all this fluff and all the fun stuff. But really, let's cut to the chase. Let's figure out, are you a good vendor for this industry or not? And, being able to provide that anonymous feedback, it's going to be really interesting for the vendors that go through this. Some may not like the feedback, and that is what it is. And that gives them the ability to course correct. And some may get phenomenal feedback, and it's like, full steam ahead. So it'll be interesting to see. To Matt's point, they're a little nervous. So I think that's good.
Sure.
I think that's good.
No, that's awesome. I think, so again, this Friday, December 10th, what time is that?
11 Eastern time.
11 Eastern time. So head over to Channel Program. We will have the specific link in the show notes in the YouTube. And then for those that are listening to audio, you probably have missed it. Head over to the website. You'll see updates and on the new channel pitches that are to come to the near future as well. All right. So, we just talked about channel pitch. I mean, I think that's one of the revolutionary things that you guys are doing over there, but it's not the only thing that you guys are doing over there as well. And there's a line item or product line that you're doing is Channel Explorer. Can you tell a little bit more about how Channel Explorer is really fitting into kind of what your mission is with Channel Program?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. That it really, as I mentioned, this is about changing how we engage, and honestly, it's bringing our industry into the 21st century. Right now, most of the industry uses LinkedIn, they use Facebook, and then they use Discord and Reddit when they're really upset. But there's not a kind of a purpose-built or centralized platform where industry can come in with an individual profile, so a personal profile, and exert their influence in the community. So we've basically created a video-enabled video platform where an individual at an MSP can come in and talk about subject matter expertise. So talk about thought leadership, really highlight their expertise in the industry. At the same time, the vendors can come in, the individuals at the vendors can come in, and they're encouraged to provide thought leadership as well. And so hopefully over time, we create a centralized platform where, the conversation's being had, and it's an open, it's not a gated community where they're kind of firewalled and we have to wait to bring in vendors and, kind of play the kabuki theater type of game. Right. So we can encourage that communication, and then we can create, called mini communities. And so one of the things that always pains me about our industry, and again, as a vendor and as a IT service provider, is, we're relying on our vendors to provide information through they may have a PRM partner, resource management platform. Very rarely would they ever get logged into, or, if there was an update from Oracle or you name it, is often missed because it's hitting the spam filters and what have you. So it's just very inefficient. So if we can create these communities where every vendor has a community, and the industry can elect which communities they can participate in or they want to participate in. And if we can encourage then that bi-directional communication, then again, it exposes the vendors, to the industry. If the industry chooses to go in and join their community, but it forces the vendor to interact. They can't hide behind, their last update, or if they've got something on their product roadmap, or if they've got a partner that's, not pleased. we can help facilitate that in a controlled manner versus just, lobbing missiles out there on all these other platforms. And so I think this will be a better way for industry to communicate with vendors and vice versa. And again, that kind of goes back to the, let's revolutionize this. Let's bring this modern, basically let's create a centralized platform where we all can have the conversation and collectively the industry flourishes from it.
Yeah, and I'll add, and also it's a big piece is giving more people voice in this community. I mean, Paco, I can just think of like you, for example, because we were talking backstage about just like the trials and tribulations of putting a podcast together, right? So
Yeah.
you have learned lessons that so many MSPs who are thinking about doing this wouldn't even know at all. And so like we want someone like you to put out content about your podcasting experience. Like I know MSPs that your peers would find it incredibly valuable, and also vendors, by the way. But it also stems from this, feeling that I had in the channel where I kept seeing the same MSPs featured on vendor panels. It was like the same 20 or 30 every time. And I was just like, this is a little boring, and there's more people in this community that are smart and need to be featured and just don't have maybe the relationships or the access. And so I think, if an MSP starts putting out really interesting content, vendors are going to notice. And what can really happen, it's really interesting in the space. Like if all of a sudden I notice XY, person putting out content, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to put this person on our next live stream. And then another vendor is going to see it and be like, oh, they're really good. And it just kind of snowballs. And the beauty of that is then the MSP can use that content in their community, in their, small business network, and just show that they're a thought leader, right? It might not all be relevant to their small business owners that they're trying to reach, but it just shows, it's just that perception of like, oh my God, like Paco's being featured everywhere now, and it creates that perception. And then the last thing, because I know you can chime in, on the vendor side, also giving access to people, like I was on the road, so I was the person always speaking. Now, Kevin was at several events, but I don't know that he was as well known during that time period in some ways to the MSPs directly. And it would have been great for Kevin to be able to do the videos, because I think he resonates at that CEO level that in a different way than I would resonate. And like we have a guy, Philip, on our team. I mean, this guy's like a digital marketing wizard. And if he just starts putting out video content, it's valuable to both vendors and MSPs in those areas of expertise. So that's what we're trying to do, give more voice to people.
Sure. No, I mean, and really quick on that note that you just mentioned, it's like exactly that. Like the early days of ID Agent, like when you thought ID Agent, you always thought Matt, right? And that was kind of what was associated with that. And you're traveling, and you were kind of the main guy at the time of doing the traveling, the sales, and so forth. And then you were like, oh, he's part of a business. No, I mean, I'm business development. So, it's exactly that realm. And then to add on, like what you just said, is giving the opportunity to those to produce content, be a subject matter expert, someone that can be leaned on. Not only do they have exposure, but I think you also have an additional piece to that, where those that may be just stuck in specific communities or pockets, and you kind of pull them into a bigger realm or another type of community, and they're like, oh man, I didn't realize he was over there. I just seen him on this, and now we go from there. Perfect example is that when during COVID, obviously I had the podcast and such that, and then you invited me to one of the first webinars with, it was me, Lisa Shore, and
I think it was one of my first live streams. I think.
Yeah. I forgot. Yeah. Oh, it's my buddy, and I forgot his name already. Jesus, he's over at Tech Vera, which has been
Reese Ormond.
Reese, he's gonna kill me. So so when it was us three,
edit that part out.
Shooting the stuff back together and figuring out from that piece, but then from that ended up elevating to be where like now it's like, hey, he has this community, but I didn't realize he had there. He appeared over here. Now hey, there's these other avenues that are reaching out to me and talk to there and go from there. And then others that may have already knew me were like, oh, I didn't realize you were doing this type of stuff. Come over here and talk. So it's that other piece where now people are realizing that you're expanding outside of your little bubble that you may have and giving more exposure to for those as well. But I mean, all great points. And being able to have a mediated fashion where you're not just having chaos, right? Like you just mentioned in the Reddits and the Discord and trying to figure out and play, crisis communication and figure all that piece. This is an opportunity where you can have a channeled voice to be able to say on both sides and kind of just carry it moving forward from there. So that's definitely going to be great to see how that expands and mows over. And then finally, which is really interesting to me, because I've heard Kevin talk about this on other podcasts and how much of a pain in the rear it's been with other vendors to deal with this. But you have a program called Channel Cache, and you're doing this in a different way for basically MDF, marketing development funds. And there are a lot of people who don't even know what that is, right? And then when they find out about that, they come to find out that there are, and I'm probably already stealing your word tracks on what is to qualify for that. And then it's like, well, I'm not even going to bother, and it's whatever. But can you kind of go in a little bit more on what brought about Channel Cache and how you're hoping to influence and help those by utilizing that program?
Yeah, and Kevin, I'll let you chime in here because it stemmed from two things. One, I would say my own knowledge being at the MSP events and asking the question. MDF just has always really interested me, and I've known there's been challenges around it. So I would just ask people at events like, do you go after MDF from different vendors, et cetera? And being asked all the time at ID Agent, do we provide MDF? But Kevin, I think you could probably set the stage also by talking about your own experience as a service provider trying to get MDF, and then I'll fill in some holes after that.
Yeah, I mean, the short of it is that it was a nightmare, right? So we were working with a handful of really well-known technologies, and we wanted to do lunch and learns. We were with one particular vendor, we were becoming a pretty prominent VAR for them. Doing a lot of integrations, a lot of reselling, and this is in the DC market. We said, hey, there's a radio show that is the drive time radio show. Let's do some advertisements on it. It heard some competing technology partners doing spots. And so I think from the time we thought of the idea to the time we actually qualified for the MDF, it was like 4 or 5 months. Right. And then we ran these spots for like 60 days. It was phenomenal. It was great. But then it was another 2 or 3 months for us to get reimbursed for that activity. And I think it was quite a bit. It was like $25,000 or $30,000, and we were doing okay, but we were, by no means a cash cow. And so that was material, it was meaningful. And so just remember that being a very arduous, cumbersome process to get that off the ground and get reimbursed. And so as we're looking at ways that we can give back to the industry that's been so damn good to us, in so many capacities, could we create a model where the ask is not arduous? The ask is not, it doesn't come with a ton of paperwork. The ask comes with, just tell us what you're going to do, prove that you did it, and we'll reimburse you. I mean, we try to make it as simple as that. So we have a quarterly drawing, and the top prize is $5,000. And there are 10 $1,000 prizes, and then a whole bunch of $500 prizes. But it's a way for us to say, get out there and just do the activity. Like, it's a way to stimulate the activity, stimulate the industry to go out and create business. And so thinking as a small emerging MSP, just for $1,000 reimbursement when I'm putting together a webinar or in-person event or buying a list, and that's huge.
Yeah, and I think one of the critical things we honed in on was this is a vendor independent or vendor agnostic, however you want to word it, MDF program, and I think that's really important. And look, I support any company in the channel that's willing to give an MSP money, but it does come with, you have to sell our product at this event, and understandably they're investing, right?
Sure.
But that's not necessarily how an MSP sells their services. They don't necessarily hone in on one service. They're selling a stack, and so sometimes that can make it a little hard on how you would present at an event and things like that. So the vendor agnostic component to it means you're focusing on your full stack of services and really doing whatever you want. And our big ask, and no ROI reports for us afterwards, it really is super simple. And our big ask is actually just come to one of our events per quarter to qualify for the MDF program. And so we're going to do randomly selected winners. But the great news is you can also increase your chances. So if you have 5 people from your organization attend those channel pitches in that quarter, well, now you've quadruple or 5 times, I don't know, whatever, what's 5 times, I don't know, 5 times your chance,
quintuple.
yeah, 5x your chances of winning. So that, and you get to attend an event and give feedback, and so we think that's a very small ask for this type of thing. And yeah, we've tried to make it, it's the cutting out the BS is kind of like has become a theme.
Sure.
I think on all of our product offerings is how do we make this easier for the MSP.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny how you all dissected it in that way, right? And being able to give multiple opportunity MDF scholarships or MDF opportunities for either emerging or what they're trying to do, because even at a $500 level, it's so significant to hold a 10, 15 person lunch and learn, and how such a small amount could be so impactful for an MSP or a small business, and I was talking to, and I don't know if you guys know Juan Fernandez. So Juan, he was always telling me like, hey, a lot of the great success that he would have are from trying to figure out how to leverage trade shows and figuring out what he was going to do for that piece. And it was one of those ideas where, for someone that's like, man, I would love to, but I got all these things I got going on, or I got to leverage a partner. I have to figure out this. Having the ability to say, well, I got the cost down, I just got to figure out how to go from there, is going to be a lot easier for someone, especially an emerging MSP, like you just mentioned, that may not qualify for a typical MDF program, would be so instrumental. But I do want to take that away where, I think that, there is much risk, right, with any MDF program, that you don't see that ROI for those giving it. But I think you all are having it in a different way where it's an effort to help, but also for them to gain access to great information so that they can engage with you and understand that you are there with other programming to help their MSP grow. So I think that's a huge bonus for everyone all around. And it's a great spin on MDF, or in this case, channel cash.
Absolutely. And, I think even though we're not requiring ROI, I think we're going to hear, I'm positive we'll hear success stories from these MDF programs. And then I'm just a big fan of sharing the success that other people have had and giving them the examples, and just so then the next quarter when people are winning the prize, be like, hey, here are some things that really worked well for some of the MSPs. And I'm a big fan of, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, give it your own flair, your own style, but you don't have to start from scratch on any of this type of stuff.
Yeah, no, all great points. We're going to take a quick break before we round out the show. We'll go back. Any last things that we want to kind of talk about or what haven't covered, talk about what channel program is offering. But if you would all like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged. There, it's about $1 a show. You'll be able to support the podcast. And not only will you just supporting us, because we appreciate it, but we will also allow you into some of the need to know things that are happening inside what we're calling our online community, which is being currently hosted on our private Facebook group, where there you have a safe space to talk and really be able to kind of be yourself. I personally really appreciate the Facebook group because we have one rule that I don't know is implemented on any other Facebook group, because there are a lot of IT Facebook groups that are out there, and there's a plethora that you can join to. There's different flavors, different niches, you can have at it. But I feel that there's always a common component where, although they're moderated, there are those that will speak. There's two effects. One, someone asking a question and being told that they're either dumb or why are they asking that type of question, not understanding where that service provider's journey is, because we all started somewhere. And now that they brought up the courage to ask that question, now they've been kind of ridiculed. Now they don't feel comfortable asking that question again. The second piece is those that answer questions that are opinions as fact. And we all know those that tend to do that. And it's a constant issue that keeps happening in a lot of the Facebook groups. So we created this group, and we basically have a zero tolerance for making people feel stupid. That's kind of what we could do. So anyone asks a question and someone is very egregious to say, why did you even think that, or what are you doing, they're out. That's just what it is. You want to be kind to your fellow MSP service providers. You want to be kind to your peers, because we all started somewhere, and now we encourage the ability to ask questions, because there's no sense of a stupid question. So if that's something you're interested in, plus being into need to know for our other things such as our event and other items that we have coming up here in 2022, head over to patreon.com/MSP Unplugged, and you'll find more information over there. And as always, we continuously thank those that support us in the near future. All right. So, fellas, I know we talked a lot about channel program, and honestly, it just feels like we're just scratching the surface. We're just really at the tip of what you're trying to bring to the industry. What are you? I guess I'll leave it with this question, and then we can kind of go into anything we may have missed. Is what do you foresee 2022 happening? I know you guys just formed. You just have these kind of kicking off the ground. How are you seeing, kind of 2022, and how you're going to be helping the channel with these programs availability?
I'll jump in one more time, Matt. It's only because I spent some time the last couple of days, fleshing out my thoughts of 2022, and I keep coming back to this theme of 2022 being the year of minimum viable enablement. And it really harkens back to what we did with ID Agent and just everything that we poured into empowering our partners. And our product was, relatively straightforward, especially the dark web monitoring side, but we had to do a ton of enablement. I hired 4 or 5 MSPs, one of which Dan Tomaszewski, who ran my customer success. He now runs it over at Kaseya. We had to put a ton of effort and time and energy into helping our partners understand the product and use the product and feel comfortable enough to go out there and sell using the exposed data. And so we poured just a ton of effort and energy and resources into creating this enablement platform, and I think that the industry is caught on. So some of the more savvy vendors have caught on, and they're doing it. I think industry is going to demand that vendors up their game when it comes to enablement. I think vendors are MSPs, the industry's tired of a lack of support. And so that's there's a prediction, or what I'm looking forward to is I'm looking forward to vendors really stepping up and doing a bang up job in enabling their channel partners. I think that's a win-win for everybody in 2022.
Yeah, and maybe I'll come from maybe the MSP side of, to me, like the increasing voice of MSPs and giving them more exposure. One, again, I go back to conversations I had with people who were just like, I wish I knew, some of these vendors actually better, because I can tell that they give preferential treatment to people they know and things like that. So, giving more voice to MSPs, giving them more opportunities to be thought leaders in our community, but then also taking that coverage and becoming thought leaders outside of it. And so, I think that's a huge opportunity this year for them, and just really having a bigger voice, because you can feel the frustration in the industry right now. And so I think I think we're here for them. And Kevin, I've now said this probably on 3 podcasts, but even though we're an ecosystem of both serving the vendor and the MSP, every day in our conversations, and we have our daily stand-up, no matter what idea we're coming up with, I still always say, well, what's this mean to the MSP? Because I was on the front lines, so I've heard everything you can ever imagine from an MSP in general, and so I feel the pain. I live it when somebody's not happy, and so that's at the forefront of everything we're doing right now.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that Matt, I know you, and I know your commitment to the channel and everything of that nature. Kevin, I've heard many stories on how you're just determined to really help in everything that you do. So, gentlemen, I think that this is going to be an amazing opportunity for both vendors and IT service providers, MSPs, to really join in. But really quick, shout out to Dan. I think, he did an amazing session for partner enablement and customer success at Gradient's Leg Up Virtual Summit. That was not too long ago. And it's just the epitome of exactly like you mentioned, Kevin, on his determination on really helping the channel. Like he's a stand-up guy, and shout out to him for really his dedication to what he does as well. But gentlemen, really appreciate the time that you have taken to talk to us about Channel Program. We hope that this will give a lot of exposure of what you all are trying to do. There's a lot of great attendance for this Friday's channel pitch. But if there are those that want to know more about Channel Program, maybe want to reach out to either one of you, what's the best way for them to get involved or just know more about Channel Program?
Yeah, I mean, it's super easy. Go to channelprogram.com, and if you want to attend the pitch live, you just go to the channel pitch section, and it takes about 10 seconds to register, and yeah, we'll see them there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, again, really appreciate you all coming out here, and appreciate you for those that are joining us. Feel free to join us every Tuesday at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. You can watch live and hang out on the chat room over at youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Just have to subscribe and hit the notification button so you never miss an episode, because we will have a special episode this Friday. I'll be talking to my good friend Colin Knox over at Gradient, and we'll talk a little bit more about what they got going on as well. So we're outside of our schedule, so that's why it's important to either listen in or hit that notification button. But you can also use your favorite podcasting app to listen to us wherever you go. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. We want to thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.